In a city filled with shining skyscrapers and bustling streets, there lived a millionaire who had everything anyone could ever dream of, from his luxury cars to his grand mansion and endless wealth. Life seemed perfect on the outside, but there was a problem nobody could solve. His only son, the millionaire's pride and joy, was now facing a challenge that money alone could not fix. It was a ticking clock situation, a crisis that allowed only one day to change everything, and the pressure was unbearable. The boy had grown up with servants attending to his every need, never lifting a finger, never learning the struggles that most people face in life. He was accustomed to comfort, indulgence, and a life where every wish was granted instantly. Yet now, even with all the resources in the world, he found himself helpless, unable to control the situation, unable to solve what needed to be solved. In the same city, hidden in the narrow streets far from the glittering skyscrapers, lived another boy, the son of a humble servant. His family had almost nothing, struggling every day to meet even the simplest needs. While the millionaire's son had toys, tutors, and endless opportunities, the servant's son learned life lessons from hardship, responsibility, and the small victories of everyday survival. He carried hope in his heart despite his struggles, and a courage that grew stronger with every obstacle. Unlike the rich boy, he understood the value of time, effort, and sacrifice. He had witnessed his parents work tirelessly, face humiliation, yet never give up. These lessons shaped him, preparing him for moments that would test his strength, patience, and intelligence in ways no wealthy upbringing ever could. The contrast between these two boys could not have been greater. One lived in a palace, where rooms were filled with gold, chandeliers, and luxury beyond imagination. The other lived in a modest, cramped home where every meal was a blessing and every small comfort was hard-earned. Yet, the story was about to show that wealth and privilege do not guarantee success, and poverty does not limit potential. The world had a way of testing both, and fate had chosen this moment to show that true courage and intelligence could come from the most unexpected places. The day began quietly in the millionaire's mansion, but an air of tension hung over the house. The boy knew the day was different. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, and no amount of servants, money, or luxury could ease his worry. He rushed from room to room, trying to find a solution, calling experts, arranging resources, spending money as if it could buy time itself. Yet every second that passed seemed to bring him closer to failure, and the fear grew heavier with every tick of the clock. Meanwhile, far away in the humble home, the servant's son began his day differently. He woke up with the sun, did his chores without complaint, helped his family, and quietly prepared for the challenges of the day. His mind was sharp, his senses alert, and although he had nothing material, he possessed something far more valuable, a heart full of courage, determination, and the ability to act wisely under pressure. It was a story of two boys, two worlds, and one single day that would change everything. The millionaire's son believed that money could solve all problems, but deep down, he was about to learn a lesson that no amount of wealth could teach. The servant's son, though living in poverty, carried a secret strength, ready to rise to the occasion when life demanded the impossible. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, their paths were destined to cross, and the events of that day would prove that the human spirit, when tested, could defy expectations, that determination, courage, and quick thinking could create miracles, even in the most unlikely circumstances. The city around them continued its normal hustle, oblivious to the storm brewing in these two homes. The rich boy, despite his surroundings of comfort and abundance, felt trapped, anxious, and alone, while the poor boy, used to struggle and sacrifice, felt a sense of readiness, a quiet confidence that he could face whatever came. It was a moment of suspense, where the balance of life's unfairness and unpredictability hung in the air, and the stage was set for a story that would inspire, thrill, and touch hearts. No one could have guessed that the day would belong not to the one with gold and privilege, but to the one with grit, determination, and an indomitable spirit. The story was about to begin, and the first seeds of courage, hope, and miracle were quietly taking root. The morning had barely begun, yet the millionaire's mansion was buzzing with attention that no amount of servants or luxury could hide. The boy, the millionaire's only son, paced across the grand marble floors of his room, his designer slippers tapping impatiently. Every door he opened revealed another perfectly arranged object, another untouched luxury, yet none of it brought him comfort. None of it could solve the problem that gnawed at his mind. He had only one day left, just 24 Hours to accomplish what seemed impossible, and for the first time in his life, he felt powerless. His father had summoned him early, the usually cheerful voice now strained and tight with worry. "This is not a time for mistakes," his father said, poring over documents that looked more like puzzles than anything else. The boy nodded, trying to appear confident, but inside, panic churned. He had grown up in a world where anything he wanted was just a command away, where money could summon the best teachers, the fastest cars, or the rarest gifts, but this problem was different. It could not be solved with wealth, influence, or charm. It required action, courage, and a clear mind, and he had never needed those things before. He tried calling experts, the finest minds his father could hire, but each attempt ended in frustration. The doctors shook their heads, the advisors shrugged, the problem seemed to grow bigger with every passing hour. The boy's usual confidence was replaced with anxiety, a gnawing sense of fear he had never known. It was as if time itself had turned against him, ticking louder in the walls of the mansion, counting down toward failure. He wandered through the halls, touching expensive furniture, glancing at portraits of his family, hoping somehow the wealth around him could give him a clue, but luxury offered no answers, no magic solution, only the cruel reminder that money could not fix everything. His heart raced as he realized how unprepared he truly was, how he had relied on privilege his entire life without ever learning resilience, strategy, or patience. Every servant rushing past him could sense the tension, yet they offered only silence, unable to bridge the gap between fear and action. Meanwhile, the city outside carried on unaware, people going about their normal lives, oblivious to the crisis unfolding inside the mansion. The boy felt isolated, trapped in a golden cage with a clock that would not stop. The walls, painted with gold leaf and decorated with priceless art, now seemed to close in, reminding him that all the wealth in the world meant nothing when faced with a challenge that demanded courage, skill, and heart. He remembered snippets of advice his father had given over the years, phrases about leadership, responsibility, and decisiveness, but none of it felt real now. None of it seemed applicable to the urgent problem staring him in the face. The boy realized that this day, these 24 hours, would define him, not as a rich boy born into comfort, but as a person who could either rise to the challenge or crumble under it. In a quiet moment, he glanced out the window and saw children playing in the streets, laughing, running, and facing their small daily battles without fear. A strange thought crossed his mind. How could someone with so little seem so strong? How could life prepare others in ways money never could? He shook his head, trying to focus, but the realization lingered, that perhaps the solution he sought would come from somewhere completely unexpected, that courage, determination, and clever thinking might matter more than wealth. He felt a tiny spark of hope, fragile but undeniable, a feeling he had never experienced in the bubble of privilege he had always known. The day stretched ahead like a vast, uncharted ocean, each hour a wave that could lift him toward success or crash him into failure. He knew the next steps he took would be critical, yet every move seemed more difficult than the last. The millionaire's son had everything, yet he had nothing when it came to solving the impossible. The irony was bitter, but undeniable, and as he braced himself for the challenge, he could not yet imagine the presence of someone else, someone from the other side of the city, someone whose courage, humility, and resourcefulness might soon change everything, someone who would show that even in a world divided by wealth and poverty, determination and heart could alter destiny. Far away from the glittering towers and golden halls of the millionaire's mansion, the city's narrow streets told a very different story. Here, the houses were small and crowded, the walls often chipped, and the air carried the scent of labor and struggle. In one such modest home lived a boy, the son of a servant, who had never known the comforts of wealth but had grown up with lessons that money could never buy. From an early age, he had learned the rhythm of life in hardship, the patience to wait, the courage to try, the persistence to rise after failure. Unlike the millionaire's son, he had no tutors to solve problems for him, no luxuries to distract him, no servants to carry his burdens. Every task, every challenge, had been his responsibility, and he had faced them all with determination, humility, and a quiet sense of purpose. That morning, the boy woke before the sun, as he did every day. His small room was barely lit, but the light of his resolve shone brighter than any chandelier. He quickly washed, helped his mother prepare breakfast, and quietly tidied the house before heading out to earn his daily living. He sold fruits, ran errands, and sometimes delivered messages across the city. All tasks seemed small, but each carried lessons in perseverance, observation, and quick thinking. These lessons had shaped him, preparing him for moments far greater than anyone could have imagined. While the millionaire's son panicked in his mansion, drowning in anxiety and frustration, the servant's son faced the day calmly, knowing that every action mattered. He understood that life rarely offered second chances, and preparation, patience, and courage were the keys to survival. The boy had witnessed his father struggle with long hours, backbreaking labor, and endless worry, and his mother had fought silently, with grace, to keep the family afloat. He had absorbed these lessons without complaint, quietly storing them in his heart like a secret weapon for the future. The servant's son was also known in the neighborhood for his cleverness and bravery. Children would look up to him, and adults often sought his help for tricky problems. He was small in stature, humble in dress, but sharp-eyed and quick-minded, and his reputation grew quietly with every good deed. He had faced countless challenges before, rescuing trapped animals, helping neighbors in emergencies, solving disputes, and finding clever solutions when others gave up. Each small victory added to his confidence, though he never boasted. For him, true strength was silent, invisible to those who only valued wealth and appearance. As he walked through the busy streets that morning, balancing a basket of goods on his head, he noticed something unusual. People were whispering, glancing nervously toward the mansion of the millionaire. Something big was happening, and though he did not know the details, the air of urgency sparked curiosity in him. He felt a strange pull, a sense that today would be different, that destiny had plans for him beyond the ordinary struggles of daily life. He tightened his grip on the basket, squared his shoulders, and continued, fully aware that his skills, courage, and cleverness might soon be needed in ways he had never imagined. Unlike the millionaire's son, who relied on wealth to solve problems, the servant's son relied on himself. His mind worked like a finely tuned machine, analyzing situations, weighing risks, and thinking several steps ahead. He had learned that nothing came free, that patience, courage, and creativity were more powerful than money, and he was ready for anything. Even the smallest challenge was a test, a way to sharpen his mind and strengthen his heart. Little did he know that today's challenge would be unlike any he had ever faced, a challenge that required not only his skills but his courage, determination, and humanity. By mid-morning, the servant's son found himself standing at the crossroads of fate. His heart beat steadily, his mind alert, and a sense of quiet confidence surrounded him. He had no idea how he would meet the impossible, but he knew that he was ready, prepared to act, to think, and to rise. He carried within him the silent power of experience, resilience, and an unbreakable spirit, qualities that the millionaire's son could never buy or inherit. And as the city carried on around them, oblivious to the extraordinary events that were about to unfold, the stage was set. The servant's son, small and humble in appearance, was about to step into a story far bigger than himself, a story that would show the world that courage, cleverness, and heart could achieve the impossible, even when wealth and privilege failed. By late morning, the city was buzzing with whispers and rumors. Everyone seemed to know that something extraordinary was about to happen. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the sun itself paused to watch. Inside the millionaire's mansion, the boy's anxiety had reached its peak. He had tried everything he could think of, spending money, calling experts, and pacing endlessly across the marble floors, but the solution remained elusive. There was nothing left but the announcement, the moment when the true challenge would be revealed, something no one could avoid. A messenger arrived, his expression serious, carrying a sealed envelope that seemed to vibrate with importance. The millionaire's son snatched it eagerly, tearing it open with trembling hands. Inside, the instructions were clear, but daunting. They described a task that seemed almost impossible, something that could not be solved by wealth, influence, or privilege alone. It required courage, intelligence, quick thinking, and the ability to act under immense pressure. The boy's heart sank as he read, realizing that his entire life of comfort and indulgence had not prepared him for this. Every second now mattered, and the weight of the challenge pressed heavily on his shoulders. Meanwhile, far across the city, the servant's son noticed the unusual commotion near the mansion. People were running with messages, talking in hushed tones, and glancing toward the sky as if seeking answers from above. Curiosity stirred within him, but unlike the millionaire's son, he did not panic. He sensed that today was different. that something extraordinary was unfolding, something that might test not his wealth or privilege, but his heart, courage, and mind. He continued with his morning work, yet a quiet excitement grew inside him, a feeling that the impossible might soon call for him. Back at the mansion, the details of the challenge became clearer, and the stakes could not have been higher. The task was not about money, nor could it be bought, bribed, or borrowed. It required someone to act with integrity, bravery, and ingenuity, someone to solve a problem that had baffled the best minds, someone to rise against the odds and defy expectations. The millionaire's son tried to make sense of it, pacing from one room to another, calling every expert he knew, yet every suggestion fell short. He realized with growing dread that this task would not bend to wealth or authority. At the same time, the servant's son, unaware of the exact details, felt a pull toward the mansion, toward the unknown challenge. There was something in the air that spoke to him, a whisper of destiny. He had faced obstacles before, but nothing as monumental as this seemed to promise. The challenge demanded courage, resilience, and cleverness, the very qualities he had honed all his life, quietly, through struggle, through responsibility, and through the daily fight to survive. He began to feel that he was meant to step into this story, that the day might belong to him. As the morning passed, the city seemed to hold its breath. The millionaire's son grew more frantic with each minute, aware that time was slipping away. Every attempt to use wealth or influence failed, and the impossible loomed ever closer. His fear intensified, but so did the servant's son's quiet determination. He moved through the streets with purpose, aware that soon he would be called to act. His mind worked quickly, anticipating obstacles, finding solutions, and preparing for what no one else seemed ready to face. Finally, the moment arrived when the challenge could no longer be ignored. The city, the mansion, and the small streets where the servant's son lived all seemed to converge in a single heartbeat. The impossible had been announced, and now the race against time had begun. One boy faced it with panic, privilege, and desperation, the other with courage, ingenuity, and unwavering determination. The stage was set, and fate had chosen to test both of them in ways that would forever change their lives. The world was about to witness how determination, courage, and heart could triumph where wealth and comfort could not. The moment the challenge was announced, the city seemed to pause, as if the streets themselves were holding their breath. Inside the millionaire's mansion, the boy's panic grew with every passing second. He ran from one room to another, dialing numbers, sending messages, trying to force a solution from his network of experts. But no matter how many advisors he consulted, no matter how much money he spent, the solution remained frustratingly out of reach. The task required more than influence or wealth. It required courage, ingenuity, and the ability to act under pressure, qualities the boy had never needed before. Meanwhile, far across the city, the servant's son felt the weight of the challenge in a different way. He did not have money to call experts or buy solutions, but he had something far more valuable: experience, patience, and a mind trained to see possibilities where others saw obstacles. He paused for a moment, analyzing the situation carefully, thinking through every potential problem, and planning his first move. Unlike the millionaire's son, who rushed blindly, panic clouding his judgment, the servant's son moved with deliberate purpose, aware that every step mattered. The first hours of the struggle were the hardest. The millionaire's son tried everything he knew, but each attempt ended in frustration. Doors he opened led only to dead ends, experts shook their heads, and every solution failed to bring relief. With each passing minute, his anxiety deepened, and a sense of helplessness crept in. He was realizing, perhaps for the first time, that money could not buy courage, wisdom, or problem-solving skills. He felt trapped in his golden cage, staring at the impossible and wondering if he would fail. At the same time, the servant's son began his struggle in a way no one could predict. He approached the challenge quietly, studying it from all angles, noting every detail, and identifying opportunities where others saw only obstacles. He called upon every lesson he had learned growing up: resourcefulness, patience, observation, and creativity. With a calm determination, he started solving small parts of the problem, each success building confidence, each step bringing him closer to the impossible. As the hours passed, the contrast between the two boys became more evident. The millionaire's son was frantic, loud, and desperate, while the servant's son was quiet, focused, and deliberate. The boy with privilege had all the tools in the world but no experience, no foresight, and no courage to act without guidance. The boy with nothing had no tools, yet every action was guided by instinct, intelligence, and an unshakable belief in himself. The city seemed to sense this difference, its streets whispering of a hero who would rise not from wealth, but from heart and determination. The struggle became more intense as obstacles grew harder. The millionaire's son made mistakes, repeated errors, and lost precious time trying to force a solution that was impossible to buy. His frustration mounted, and tears threatened to spill. He had never faced a challenge that did not bend to his will, and the weight of the day pressed down heavily. Meanwhile, the servant's son encountered his own hurdles, but he treated them differently. Each obstacle became a lesson, each failure a chance to rethink and improve. He worked tirelessly, sometimes improvising, sometimes relying on intuition, but always moving forward. Each small victory strengthened his resolve, showing him that the impossible could be broken down into achievable steps. As evening approached, the millionaire's son had begun to despair, realizing that time was almost gone. He had spent the day running, panicking, and relying on everything money could buy, yet he was no closer to success than he had been in the morning. The servant's son, in contrast, was making progress, each move calculated, precise, and meaningful. The impossible was no longer a distant dream, it was slowly becoming a reality under his careful hands. The city around them seemed unaware, yet the stage was set for an extraordinary conclusion. One boy was failing despite everything, the other was succeeding with nothing but courage, wit, and determination. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the day had already proven its lesson. The struggle had revealed the true nature of both boys. Wealth could not replace courage, and poverty could not limit potential. The impossible was no longer just a word, it was a test of heart, mind, and spirit, and the servant's son, small, humble, and determined, was about to show that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person could achieve what everyone else believed could never be done. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the city in shades of gold and crimson, the impossible challenge seemed to grow heavier, almost tangible, hanging in the air like a shadow. Inside the millionaire's mansion, the boy sank into despair, realizing that all his frantic efforts, all the money spent, and all the experts consulted had brought him no closer to solving the problem. His chest tightened, and a sense of panic clawed at him. He had thought that wealth could conquer anything, but today, for the first time, he faced the cruel truth that some battles could not be bought or commanded. Meanwhile, the servant's son had reached a point in the challenge where mere cleverness and effort were no longer enough. He faced a critical obstacle, one that seemed insurmountable, a test that would decide whether he could succeed or fail. His mind raced, considering every angle, every possible solution, and yet nothing seemed perfect. The weight of the task pressed on him, heavier than any burden he had carried before, and the clock ticked relentlessly, reminding him that time would not wait. But unlike the millionaire's son, whose panic was growing, the servant's boy did something remarkable. He paused, closed his eyes for a brief moment, and breathed deeply. Gathering his thoughts, he remembered all the lessons life had taught him: patience, observation, resilience, and the power of thinking differently. Instead of forcing a solution or rushing blindly, he allowed his mind to explore quietly, to see patterns and possibilities that were invisible to others. He knew that the turning point would not come from haste or panic, but from clarity, courage, and a willingness to act wisely. He studied the obstacle carefully, noting every detail, small clue, and hidden opportunity. What had seemed impossible at first began to show cracks, small ways through which determination could create a path. Step by step, he formulated a plan, combining his experience, intuition, and careful thinking. Each decision carried weight, each move demanded focus, but he faced the challenge with quiet confidence, refusing to be intimidated by the enormity of the task. Meanwhile, the millionaire's son wandered the halls of his mansion, calling out for help, panicking with each second, and watching time slip away like water through his fingers. Every failed attempt made him more desperate, and yet he could not find a path forward. His privilege, his wealth, and his comfort were useless against this test, and the fear of failure gnawed at him relentlessly. Outside, the city seemed calm, unaware of the tension building in the heart of the servant's son. Yet, in those quiet streets, the boy's courage shone brighter than any chandelier in the millionaire's mansion. Every small step he took brought him closer to success. every challenge he overcame built his confidence, until finally, at the very moment when the task seemed almost impossible, a breakthrough appeared. Something that required both boldness and careful judgment. The servant's son acted decisively, following the plan he had crafted with patience and intelligence, and the impossible began to crumble before him. It was a turning point not just in the challenge, but in the story itself. The servant's son, who had nothing but courage, heart, and a sharp mind, had begun to overcome the obstacle that had paralyzed the richest boy in the city. He realized that success was not about wealth, status, or power. It was about determination, focus, and the willingness to face fear with a clear mind. The challenge that had seemed insurmountable was now a puzzle he could solve, one piece at a time, each move calculated and deliberate. Inside the mansion, the millionaire's son watched helplessly as events unfolded that he could not control. He saw that the solution was not coming from him, that the impossible was being handled by someone he had never considered a rival, someone whose life had been defined by struggle, perseverance, and courage. The realization stung, but there was no time for self-pity. The clock continued to tick, and the turning point had arrived, signaling that the day belonged not to privilege, but to heart, intelligence, and relentless determination. The servant's son, small and humble in appearance, stood at the very edge of success, his mind sharp, his heart steady, and his spirit unbroken. He had faced the obstacle that could have stopped anyone, yet here he was, proving that the impossible could be achieved, not through wealth or influence, but through courage, wisdom, and unwavering belief in oneself. And as the city carried on around them, the turning point had been reached, setting the stage for the triumph that was about to change everything. As the last rays of the sun began to fade behind the city skyline, the moment of truth had arrived. The servant's son stood at the final step of the impossible task, his hands steady, his mind clear, and his heart beating with quiet confidence. Every decision he had made, every lesson life had taught him, and every struggle he had faced had led to this very moment. The impossible, once distant and terrifying, was now within reach, and it required nothing more than courage, focus, and determination to make it real. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, the millionaire's son could only watch from afar, panic and fear etched deep into his face. He had spent the entire day searching for a way, using every resource, every connection, and every ounce of privilege at his disposal. Yet here was the truth staring him in the face. Money could not create miracles, it could not conjure solutions, and it could not replace determination. The impossible was happening, but not because of him, and the realization weighed heavily on his heart. The servant's son moved with a careful precision that only comes from experience. Each small step, each calculated move, brought him closer to achieving what no one had believed possible. The city around him seemed to fade away, leaving only the challenge and his unwavering focus. Time became both an enemy and an ally, each tick reminding him of the urgency, yet sharpening his mind and instincts. He was in a zone where fear did not exist, where only clarity, courage, and purpose guided every action. Then, in a moment that seemed to last both forever and an instant, the final piece fell into place. The servant's son completed the impossible, not with wealth, not with shortcuts, not with luck, but with heart, determination, and clever thinking. A wave of quiet triumph washed over him, and the city, unknowingly, seemed to hum in response. The impossible had been achieved by the boy who had nothing but courage, who had faced hardship every day, and who had never relied on anyone else to save him. Back at the mansion, the millionaire's son could hardly believe what had happened. He watched as the news of the servant's son's success spread, whispers turning into awe, awe turning into admiration, and finally into respect. For the first time, he understood a truth that no wealth could teach. Real strength comes not from what you own, but from what you carry inside your heart, from courage, perseverance, and the willingness to rise when everyone else doubts you. The servant's son did not boast or celebrate loudly. He simply smiled quietly, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced the impossible, broken it down step by step, and shown that determination, intelligence, and resilience can turn any situation around. For him, the reward was not recognition or riches. It was proof that even the smallest, humblest person can achieve what no one else dares to try. In the streets, people began to gather, hearing the story and witnessing the result. They marveled at the boy who had turned the impossible into reality, and slowly, the lessons of courage, perseverance, and heart began to ripple through the city. Even the millionaire's son, humbled and thoughtful, approached him, no words of arrogance or superiority left in his mouth, only respect, gratitude, and the desire to understand how someone so young and poor could accomplish what he could not. The moment was not just about completing a challenge, it was about proving a universal truth: the impossible is never truly impossible for those who refuse to give up, who think creatively, act bravely, and believe in themselves. The servant's son had shown that limitations exist only in the mind, and that the human spirit, when tested, can rise above any obstacle. The city, the mansion, and the small streets that had witnessed the struggle all seemed to celebrate silently, as if acknowledging that greatness often comes from the most unexpected places. And so, as night settled over the city, the impossible was no longer a word to fear. The servant's son had achieved what everyone said could not be done, turning the story into a legend, not of wealth or privilege, but of courage, determination, and heart. The millionaire's son had learned his first true lesson in humility. The city had witnessed a miracle born from struggle, and the world quietly understood that true heroes are often invisible until they rise to the challenge. Night had fallen over the city, casting long shadows across the streets and bathing the millionaire's mansion in a soft, golden glow. The day that began with fear, panic, and impossibility had ended in quiet triumph. A story that no one had expected had unfolded, proving that courage, determination, and heart could overcome even the most impossible challenges. The servant's son, small in appearance but mighty in spirit, had achieved what seemed beyond human reach, and in doing so, had changed not only his own life, but the lives of those around him. Inside the mansion, the millionaire's son sat quietly, reflecting on the events of the day, his chest still tight with the memory of panic, but his mind now open to understanding. He realized that all the wealth he had, all the luxury surrounding him, and all the people ready to serve him could not replace the strength he had witnessed in the servant's son. For the first time, he understood that life's most valuable lessons were not taught in gold-plated rooms or through privilege, but through struggle, responsibility, and the courage to act when fear is loudest. The servant's son, walking back through the dimly lit streets, felt a sense of calm satisfaction, not pride, not arrogance, but quiet fulfillment. He had faced the impossible and succeeded, proving that true strength comes not from the riches one owns, but from the heart and mind one develops. Along the way, he had learned something else as well, that humility, patience, and resilience are far more powerful than brute force or wealth. His family, his friends, and even strangers who had heard of his triumph looked at him with admiration, not for the reward he received, but for the courage he had shown. News of his achievement spread through the city, and the impossible challenge that had once seemed insurmountable became a story of inspiration. The millionaire's son approached him at last, his voice quieter than usual. Stripped of arrogance. "I underestimated you," he said sincerely. "Today, I have learned a lesson that no money could ever buy." The servant's son nodded, smiling gently, recognizing that true greatness lies not in wealth or status, but in courage, wisdom, and action. They had both faced the same day, the same challenge, but their responses had been worlds apart, proving that character is built, not inherited. The city itself seemed to breathe easier as the story settled into the hearts of its people. Children whispered to each other about courage and perseverance, adults paused to reflect on the power of patience and careful thinking, and even the richest families began to recognize that wealth alone could never define success. The impossible had been achieved, not by luck or privilege, but by a young boy who had been shaped by hardship, responsibility, and unwavering determination. That night, as the stars appeared one by one, the servant's son sat quietly with his family, sharing stories, laughter, and dreams. The day had proven that miracles could be created by anyone, regardless of status or wealth, and that every obstacle could be overcome with the right combination of heart, mind, and courage. He understood now that life's challenges were not meant to be feared, but embraced, each one an opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, and braver. Meanwhile, the millionaire's son lay awake in his luxurious room, thinking of what he had witnessed. He realized that humility, gratitude, and the willingness to learn were more valuable than any treasure. That day had reshaped him, opening his eyes to a world beyond privilege, showing him the power of courage and determination in the hands of those who are willing to fight for what seems impossible. The contrast between the two boys' lives had taught him that true success is measured not by wealth, but by character, resilience, and the ability to act when faced with fear. And so, the city slept under the quiet night sky, but the story of that remarkable day lingered in every heart it touched. A young boy from humble beginnings had achieved the impossible, proving that the human spirit, when tested, can rise above wealth, status, or circumstance. The millionaire's son had learned his first real lesson in humility, and the servant's son had shown that courage, cleverness, and heart are forces stronger than gold. As dawn approached, the city knew one undeniable truth, that even the most unlikely heroes can change the world, and that true greatness is measured not by what you have, but by what you do.